The moon was bright that night, so bright it almost looked like a silver coin in the sky. Its light fell softly on the quiet island, touching the sea and making the waters sparkle. On the other side of the world, far away, the same moon shone above a busy city in London, where people hurried home under streetlights, not even noticing the beauty above them. But for two people who had never met, that moon was not just a piece of the sky, it was a bridge. Evelyn Grace sat on the rocky shore of a small island in the Philippines, her bare feet in the sand, her sketchbook resting on her lap. She was 25, a quiet soul with a love for the ocean. Her life was simple, helping her grandmother run a little seafood cafe, drawing in the evenings, and watching the moon rise over the sea. She didn't know why she loved the moon so much. Maybe it was because it felt constant. Even when life changed, the moon was always there. Even when her father left when she was a child, even when her best friend moved away, the moon kept returning, night after night. That night, Evelyn lifted her head and whispered, "If someone else is looking at you right now, I hope they're happy." She didn't expect anyone to hear. Thousands of miles away, in London, a man named Oliver Hayes leaned against the balcony of his apartment. He was 31, a writer who had stopped writing. Once his books had been loved by many, but after a painful breakup and the loss of his mother, his words had dried up. He hadn't finished a story in 2 years. He looked at the same moon Evelyn was watching. It hung above the Thames River, its light touching the water just as it touched the sea in Evelyn's world. He sipped his tea and said quietly, "I wonder if somewhere someone else is looking at this." Oliver didn't know that in that exact moment, someone was. Evelyn's island life was far from London's noise. Her mornings were filled with the smell of brewing coffee, the sound of fishermen calling out, and the warmth of the sun on her skin. Her afternoons were slow, painting, sketching, and helping her grandmother serve customers. At night, she would walk to the shore to watch the moon. Oliver's life was different. His mornings were filled with the rush of trains, the smell of roasted coffee from city cafes, and the hum of conversations in crowded streets. His afternoons were lonely, staring at his laptop, deleting every sentence he wrote. At night, he often stood on his balcony, letting the moonlight keep him company. Neither of them knew that a single online post would soon bring them together. One evening, Evelyn took a picture of the moon over the sea and posted it on a small photography forum. She titled it, "For Whoever is Looking at the Same Moon Tonight." She thought nothing of it. She didn't have many followers, and her post usually only got a few likes. But the next day, someone had left a comment. It was from a user named Lost Writer. The comment read, "I was looking at it too, but mine was over the Thames. Funny how it's the same moon, isn't it?" Evelyn smiled when she read it. She replied, "The moon is kind like that. It doesn't care about distance." Oliver, sitting in his London flat, stared at her reply for a long time. Something about her words felt warm. He typed back, "Maybe that's why I like it. It doesn't feel far away." From that night, they began to exchange small messages. At first, it was about the moon, how it looked that night, whether it was full or thin like a silver smile, whether the clouds covered it or left it clear. But soon they began to talk about other things, about Evelyn's little island, about Oliver's favorite cafes in London, about the smell of the ocean and the sound of rain on old rooftops. Evelyn learned that Oliver loved old books, that he had traveled to Canada and once in winter and had fallen in love with the snow, that he sometimes stayed awake until dawn just to watch the moon fade into morning. Evelyn learned that Oliver had never left her island, that she dreamed of visiting Australia to see the Great Barrier Reef, and that she kept seashells in a wooden box under her bed. They didn't send photos of themselves, they didn't talk about love, but something quiet and deep began to grow between them. Weeks turned into months. Their messages became longer. They spoke of fears. Oliver confessed that he was afraid he would never write again. Evelyn admitted she was scared her life would always be small, that she would never see the world beyond her island. One night, Oliver wrote, "Sometimes I think you're the only person I can talk to without pretending." Evelyn replied, "Then maybe the moon is doing its job. It's keeping us honest." But in the real world, storms don't always wait. One afternoon, Evelyn's grandmother became very ill. The doctor from the nearby town came to the island and told them she needed treatment in the city. But the treatment was expensive, and Evelyn didn't have the money. That night, she didn't post about the moon. She didn't reply to Oliver's last message. Oliver noticed her silence. For the first time since they began talking, she was gone. He stared at the empty chat box, feeling a strange ache. He didn't know why it hurt so much. 3 nights passed. On the fourth, Evelyn returned with a short message. "I might not be able to talk much for a while. My grandmother is sick." Oliver's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He wanted to help, but they were just two strangers linked by the moon. Instead, he wrote, "I'm here if you need to talk. I'll keep watching the moon for both of us." Evelyn stared at the message for a long time before whispering aloud, "Thank you, Oliver." Somewhere on opposite sides of the world, two people looked at the same moon, one from a quiet beach in the Philippines, the other from a balcony in London, and wondered if distance really mattered. Because maybe, just maybe, the moon had already chosen them for each other. The moon was hidden that night. Thick clouds covered it, making the sky seem heavy and darker than usual. Evelyn stood outside the little seafood cafe, holding a mug of tea. She could hear the soft crash of waves in the distance, but her eyes kept going to the sky, searching for that familiar silver light. Her grandmother, Lilia, was resting in the small bedroom inside. The doctor's words still echoed in Evelyn's head. "She'll need more than rest. The medicine is expensive, and she'll need tests at the hospital in Manila." Evelyn had never been to Manila. The idea of traveling there scared her almost as much as the thought of losing her grandmother. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Oliver. "Oliver, clouds here too. The moon's hiding. Guess we'll have to imagine it tonight." She smiled faintly. Even when her mind was heavy, his words felt like a small light. "Evelyn, I think it's still there, just waiting for the right moment to come back." Oliver sat at his desk in London, staring at her reply. His apartment was quiet, except for the sound of rain tapping against the window. He hadn't been able to focus on his writing for weeks, but tonight he found himself opening his notebook. On the first page, he wrote, "The moon doesn't leave. It only hides, waiting for the clouds to pass." He didn't tell Evelyn that, but that was the first line of anything he'd written in months. Over the next week, their conversations became shorter. Evelyn was busy taking care of her grandmother, working extra hours at the cafe, and trying to find ways to raise money. She didn't want Oliver to worry, so she avoided telling him how bad things really were. But Oliver noticed the change. "Oliver, you're quiet lately. Is it me?" Evelyn. No, it's just life. A lot is happening here. Oliver wanted to ask more, but he didn't want to push her away. Instead, he started sending her small things: a photograph of the moon over Big Ben, a recording of the sound of London rain, a short video of the Thames at night. Evelyn in return sent him the sound of waves on her shore, a picture of seashells she had collected that morning, and a sketch she'd made of the moon when it was full. One evening, Evelyn sat by her grandmother's bed, watching her sleep. She opened her phone and scrolled through Oliver's old messages. She found one where he had said, "Sometimes I think the moon is a promise." She didn't reply to it then, but now she typed, "If the moon is a promise, what happens when it's gone?" It took only a minute for him to reply. "It never goes. Even when you can't see it, it's still there, like me." Her chest tightened. She didn't know why a man she had never met in person could make her feel this way. Meanwhile, Oliver's life in London wasn't much easier. His book publisher had called him, asking if he was ever going to finish his next novel. Rent was due soon, and the city was cold and gray. But every night, when he stood on his balcony and looked at the moon, he felt less alone. One Friday night, Oliver wrote something different. "Evelyn, what if we met one day? Not soon, maybe, but someday, under the same moon." Evelyn stared at the message for a long time. Her heart wanted to say yes, but her mind was full of reasons to say no. Distance, money, the fear of disappointment. She finally typed back, "Someday." Oliver had never been to the Philippines. He barely knew anything about the islands except what Evelyn had told him about the coconut trees, the fishermen's songs at dawn, the smell of grilled fish by the shore, and the way the moonlight made the sea look like liquid silver. The hug lasted longer than either of them expected. Evelyn could feel Oliver's heart beating fast against her cheek, and Oliver could smell the faint scent of sea salt in her hair. When they finally stepped back, she blinked hard, as if trying to make sure he was real. "You," she said softly, still in disbelief, "you actually came here?" Oliver smiled faintly. "I told you I would, someday." Her grandmother stirred in bed, and Evelyn quickly turned toward her. "Lola, this is a friend from London." Her grandmother, Lilia, opened her eyes and studied Oliver for a moment before smiling gently. "From very far away," she said in a weak but warm voice. Oliver crouched by the bed. "It's an honor to meet you, ma'am." Over the next hour, Evelyn moved between making tea, checking on her grandmother, and sitting with Oliver on the small porch. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth after a recent rain. They talked like they always did, but now there was a strange new feeling being able to see each other's eyes, hear the changes in their voices, notice the little things they never could through messages. Oliver noticed that Evelyn's hands were calloused from working at the cafe. Evelyn noticed that Oliver had a small scar on his jaw she'd never seen in any of the pictures he'd sent. "So," she said, folding her arms, "why didn't you tell me you were coming?" He leaned back against the wooden post of the porch. "Because I was afraid you'd tell me not to." She laughed softly, but there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "It's a lot. You came across the world for someone you've never met." "I didn't come for someone I've never met," Oliver said quietly. "I've known you for months, Evelyn. This is just the first time I've seen you in the same sky." Her chest tightened, and for a moment, she didn't know what to say. That night, the moon rose high and full, casting silver light over the sea. Oliver and Evelyn sat on the shore, their feet buried in the cool sand. Her grandmother was resting inside, and the cafe was closed. "I don't want to go back to London yet," Oliver admitted, "but I can't stay forever." "I know," Evelyn said. "Your life is there, my life is here." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the waves. Then Evelyn whispered, "I wish the moon could hold us both in one place." Oliver turned to her. "Maybe it can, for now." In the days that followed, they fell into a quiet rhythm. Oliver helped prepare the cafe roof, carried bags from the market, and read books aloud to Lilia when Evelyn was busy cooking. Evelyn showed him the hidden parts of the island, small caves where the water was crystal clear, a hilltop where the sunset painted the sky in gold and pink, a tiny chapel where fishermen prayed before storms. Every night, they returned to the shore to watch the moon. But time was moving quickly. Oliver's return flight was in less than 2 weeks, and the money for Lilia's treatment wasn't enough. Evelyn tried not to think about it, but every time she looked at her grandmother, the fear grew heavier. One afternoon, Oliver found Evelyn sitting behind the cafe, her head in her hands. "Evelyn," he said gently, sitting beside her, "tell me the truth. How much more do you need for the treatment?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. You've done so much." "I haven't done enough," he said firmly. "Please, tell me." She hesitated, then whispered the amount. It was more than she could earn in months. Oliver didn't respond immediately. He pulled out his phone and began typing. She frowned. "What are you doing?" "I'm selling something," he said simply. "What?" He looked up at her. "My watch, my camera, a few other things. I don't need them as much as you need your grandmother." Her eyes widened. "No, Oliver, I can't." "You can," he interrupted gently, "because this isn't just about you or her. It's about the fact that the moon brought me here, and I'm not going to waste that. Her tears burned in her eyes, but she didn't know how to thank him without breaking down. That evening, they sat by the sea again, watching the moon rise. "Do you ever think about what happens after you leave?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Every day," Oliver admitted, "and it scares me. But I think if we've been able to find each other once under the same moon, we can do it again." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "Promise?" "Promise," he said. The waves whispered against the shore, and above them, the moon shone bright and full, as if it were listening. They didn't know it yet, but the night of his departure was coming faster than either of them wanted, and with it, a choice that could change everything. The last few days felt like sand slipping through their fingers. No matter how tightly they tried to hold on, time kept running away. Evelyn and Oliver still laughed, still shared quiet dinners and moonlit walks, but there was an unspoken sadness in every glance. The date of his flight back to London was written on both their hearts, even if neither said it out loud. Lilia's health had improved slightly since starting the new medicine Oliver had helped pay for. She had more energy, enough to sit outside on the porch and watch the sunset. She often smiled at Oliver, and once she told him, "You've brought the moon closer to my granddaughter." The day before Oliver was set to leave, Evelyn took him to her favorite place on the island, a high cliff that looked over the endless blue sea. They climbed the narrow path in silence, the wind carrying the smell of salt and wildflowers. When they reached the top, the sun was sinking low, painting the horizon in gold and crimson. Below them, waves crashed against the rocks, sending sprays of white foam into the air. "This is where I come when I want to remember that the world is bigger than my fears," Evelyn said softly. Oliver looked at her, memorizing every detail, the way the wind tugged at her hair, the way the fading light touched her skin, the way her eyes seemed to hold both hope and sadness. "I'm going to miss this place," he admitted, "but more than that, I'm going to miss you." She swallowed hard, looking down at the sea. "People say long distance is hard." "It is," he agreed. "But people also said it was impossible for a girl in the Philippines and a man in London to meet. And yet, here we are." She turned to face him. "So, what happens now?" He stepped closer, reaching for her hand. "Now we live under the same moon, just like before. Only this time we know each other's faces. We know what it's like to stand side by side." Her fingers tightened around his. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he said honestly. "But maybe love is just choosing to keep looking at the same moon, no matter how far apart we are." That night, they didn't sleep. They walked along the shore, their feet leaving trails in the damp sand, the moon bright above them. They didn't talk much. Words felt too small for what they were feeling. When the first light of dawn touched the water, Oliver finally said, "It's time." The boat that would take him to the mainland was waiting at the dock. Evelyn stood beside him as he handed his small bag to the boatman. "Write to me," she said. "Every night," he promised. "And don't forget the moon," she added, forcing a small smile. "I couldn't if I tried." For a moment they just stood there, the sound of the sea around them. Then, before he stepped onto the boat, Oliver leaned forward and kissed her forehead. "Someday," he whispered. The boat pulled away, and Evelyn stood on the dock, watching him grow smaller against the horizon. The sun was rising behind her, but above the fading morning sky, the moon was still faintly visible, pale and steadfast.
That night, alone on the shore, Evelyn looked up at the moon and whispered, "Good night, Oliver." In London, hours later, Oliver stood on his balcony, the city lights glowing below him. He lifted his eyes to the same moon and said softly, "Good night, Evelyn." And though oceans lay between them, the moon carried their voices across the distance, keeping the promise it had made from the very beginning. Because love, like the moon, doesn't disappear, it only waits for the clouds to pass.